So by now, everybody's undoubtedly heard about Reese Witherspoon's divorce, second divorce, to her husband, from her husband, I guess I should say, Jim Toth, Toth. And normally, I do not comment on, or take the time, I should say, to discuss Hollywood divorces because, yawn, right? I mean, really, do we need to talk about it? No. But I'm making an exception this time because of the details of this particular divorce or story. I also have to take, what I'm reading with a grain of salt, but you can kind of read between the lines and put some things together a little bit from a distance, not on the obviously not on the really intricate details, but you can get a good idea. So I'm going to start by reading this most recent article from something called the Mercury News, which when you look at something and you research it, you'll find that no matter how many news sources you get, they kind of overlap. I'm sure you know that. So you're reading a lot of the same kind of thing in different sources, so it doesn't really matter all that much where you're getting it from at that point, if they're sharing the same information. Okay, so this one says, according to the tale being spun by the celebrity press, Witherspoon's nearly 12-year marriage to Jim Toth couldn't accommodate her success and suggests that she might have been busy putting her career ahead of her marriage. It's a tale as old as time. Her success drove them apart, says Juliet Littman, who's a co-host of the Ringer Dish podcast. It's a nefarious narrative. It's very frustrating because it takes away from what she's accomplished, which I find really interesting because that it does nothing of the sort. Both of those things can be true. It could be true that she put her career ahead of her marriage, just like men can do. Although in Hollywood, it's super, well, I shouldn't say in Hollywood. In general, it's more common today among women since they're the ones, well, anyway, that's another conversation. So the fact that that is true, that could be true, doesn't take anything away at all from what she's accomplished. You can accomplish a lot. In fact, quite the opposite. It's because you've accomplished a lot that something else is taking a back seat. The claims about the couple's split are based in part on Witherspoon's own acknowledgement that she has always been a competitive overachiever whose childhood nickname was, quote, Little Miss Type A, end quote. She's become so much more powerful than she was when they married and has expanded her areas of interest in so many ways, a source told Page 6. Another source told People they are two very different people, though. Reese is headstrong and focused. Although very hardworking, Jim is more laid back. Yet another source said to People, she has her hand in a lot of pots. He prefers less frenzy. One translation of these statements is that Witherspoon's career started to take off in exciting and lucrative new directions in the 2010s, while Toth's remained flat, with her success leading them to grow apart, Littman said. However, Toth is also said to be driven, given that he worked his way up from the mailroom at leading Hollywood talent agency CAA to become one of the company's top executives before leaving in 2019. At the same time, he's said to be more laid back. Okay, we've already heard that. While Witherspoon's fortunes were on the rise, she, by the way, sold her company, Hello Sunshine, for $900 million. I think that was around 2010. Toth suffered a high-profile business setback after he left CAA to join Quibi, the short-form streaming platform. The video app folded just 6 months after its launch, losing nearly $2 billion and becoming a target of mockery. A source told Radar Online that Toth's decision to join Quibi was the beginning of the end of the couple. The Blast reported. Littman's Ringer Dish co-host Amanda Dobbins agreed that some might blame Witherspoon for the end of the marriage, but the same set of facts could point to Toth becoming less appealing to his wife. quote, "She's a notoriously get things done kind of person," Dobbins said. "She doesn't have time to have an unemployed former agent sitting on her couch." End quote. After Quibi failed, Toth worked for Hello Sunshine as an advisor and investor. After the Hello Sunshine sale, both Toth and Witherspoon had more money than either of them could ever figure out what to do with, and it was time to reassess. So I couldn't help but jump on here and comment and talk about this, not actually with respect to these two individuals, but to what this story is representative of. I don't know either one of them, obviously. Plus, they're just Hollywood people, and that's like a whole another set of circumstances for marriage that don't apply to the rest of us. I mean, there's a reason why Hollywood marriages are notorious for failing. And that's not what I'm here to discuss. And plus, that's kind of common sense. We know what that is. But I thought it was interesting. Well, first of all, the fact that I don't care about them in particular, I do care about the messaging coming out of a divorce or of anything that happens in Hollywood because it's so high profile and because young people are definitely affected by that, dramatically so, actually. And so it's the wrong messaging about the circumstances that bothers me, not the particular people involved. So let's go back to the beginning where Witherspoon herself acknowledged that her nickname was Little Type A. As somebody who is a Type A, the way that it would be very easy to see and to assume that in this case and in many, many other cases, many other relationships across the country and beyond, that there is an assumption that that personality type is all good. Like, you're just fine the way you are, and there's nothing wrong with that, and all you have to do is find someone else who I guess is exactly like that and respects it, and you'll live happily ever after. And maybe that's what will happen if she gets with Tom Brady, since that's the latest news on that front, who is far more close to her net worth, I guess we'll say, than poor old Jim Toth, who's only got a couple million under his belt or whatever comparatively. But so there's two things going on here. There's the idea that Type A personalities are blameless. There's nothing wrong with it, and you don't need to curb that at all. And your person should just be able to keep up with that and not have any issues with it. That's number one, which, as somebody who is Type A and wrote a book called The Alpha Female's Guide to Men in Marriage, literally helping women curb that desire or need to control in order to have a more successful and peaceful relationship, regardless of the personality of the person that you're married to. Obviously, I don't agree then with the idea that, as it said earlier or said farther down, she's a get things done kind of person. She doesn't have time for an unemployed former agent sitting on her couch. I mean, that's just disgusting. I mean, obviously, that suggests that she can do no wrong. She's just harmless, blameless, and he's the problem. I mean, they're always, no matter what divorce you see in Hollywood or in the magazine, that's always the guy's fault. Always. I mean, that's just a standard thing. And it tends to fall along the lines of women being successful and men not keeping up. So that's one aspect of it, is this personality difference that they refer to several times in here. She has her hands in a lot of pots. He prefers less frenzy. I mean, there's lots of marriages where one person is more, I don't know, I guess ambitious, but that's not even really the right word, because I'm sure he's perfectly ambitious. He sounds like he is, but she's got a problem. I mean, she's like off the charts on her need for um, power and money. Clearly she cannot stop moving, and she has her hands in 1,000 different things, and that is that is something to address in a marriage, regardless of who's doing that. It happens to be the woman here, but you could say the same thing if it was a man. If you have that need or desire to where you can't stop and you're constantly moving 24/7 because you can't sit still with yourself and you can't live a calmer life, especially when you're married with kids. If you were on your own, it would still be problematic, but at least no one else is being affected by it. But if you're married with kids, other people are being affected by that desire, need, behavior, what have you. And so the idea that there's nothing wrong with it is silly, because if you cannot sit still, then you are running after something. You are running from something because you can't be happy or settled with enough. And I'm not even talking about her per se. I'm talking about just people who relate to this or whose lifestyles are similar. Again, this is not about them as individuals, but about the picture that's painted here that is very common in many marriages. So that's one thing, that type A thing. Then the other piece is, of course, which I've talked about endlessly, what happens to marriages when the woman is significantly more successful than the man. And this is a new reality that we're living in that's not going away. I mean, not anytime soon. Maybe if it's true that college degrees start to be less of a thing, and somehow, and it's already starting actually, you can turn out to be very successful without a college degree, male or female. This will sort of even itself out. But as we know right now, women are more successful in the school, in college, and it's and men aren't. So they're rising above them, and so we know that the tables have turned quite a bit, and we know that this is problematic. What we don't like is to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it because it's so common that, first of all, you're going to offend somebody somewhere. And second of all, it's uncomfortable because it challenges this idea that men and women are equal as in the same, and it doesn't matter who earns what in a marriage and all the rest. And that's crap, because the reality is the reality. It doesn't make any difference how much we change as a society. Human nature doesn't change. And when a woman climbs to that kind of to those levels, even the first of all, the average guy is never going to be able to keep up. And he's not, and this guy, her ex-husband, soon to be ex-husband, Jim Toth, wasn't even an average guy. He's far from average. But whether he's worth 4 million or 20, if you do the Googling, you'll find both of those numbers. I don't know which is accurate, but it still pales in comparison to her $400 million net worth. So once that happens, everything about your relationship changes. So you can kind of infer, based on what was said here, that there was a point at their marriage prior to her selling Hello Sunshine when they were perhaps on more equal footing. And then once that happened, to think that that's not going to change everything is just naive. It does, and it is, and it does. And so we don't know the details about the ins and outs of their story, but we do know what that looks like in general in many homes. And that is why I'm always saying that if you look at your money and how you're handling your money and what's happening on the money front in your marriage, you have a story about your marriage. So there are a lot of different stories there, of course. You can have a situation where nobody wants to talk about the money at all because it requires too much compromise and too much vulnerability. And it might require hearing the word no, you can't do that or have that if you're trying to combine income. So a lot of people just keep everything separate and think that makes it easier. But the reality is you always know where the money's coming from. And the way men and women respond to their respective earnings typically do not match. Does not match. A man's income comes from a deep-seated desire and need to protect and to provide for his family. When a woman's earning, it's not because she wants to provide for her man. It's not equal. So when she's rising above, whereas if it was reversed, if the man was rising above, that works well because it's going with human nature, which is him wanting to take care of and provide for his wife and kids. And of course, the kids need providing for sure. But it doesn't unsettle the relationship between the man and the woman when he's the higher earner because it's moving with the natural flow of things. When you reverse that, depending on the degree, and obviously with this case, with Reese Witherspoon and her ex, that's a massive, there's just nowhere for that to go but down. I mean, that's just too massive. So I'm not saying that if a woman makes a little bit more than her man, that's problematic. It's all in degrees. Levels or degrees. And the question is, when does it become a problem and when does it not? And I'm going to do a whole separate thing on that because I think we have to start having some plan for how marriages can stay together when the woman makes more than the man and whether or not that's even possible. So I do want to do a separate thing on that, which I'm not going to do today. But I'm just jumping on here to show you that this scenario that's painted here is not workable. And it's not rocket science. But when you see and hear and read about this stuff in the news, you don't get any of this context, any of this analysis. So the takeaway, especially if you're not a thoughtful person, which of course everybody who listens to this program is very thoughtful, so you guys don't need to hear this. But they're taking away this idea that a man can't handle a successful woman, which, gosh, it's just so much more nuanced than that and so not at all how I would ever describe the scenario. There's much more going on there that you are not seeing, that's behind the scenes of how the dynamics play out financially and then in your relationship, in your marital bed, the whole thing, when the wife significantly out-earns the husband. So I didn't even think that that's where I was going with this. I just wanted to come on here and address this piece of news. That's it. Because I want to start doing more of that. You know, when I see stuff in the news, I'm going to come on here and chat about it. If you guys do or don't like that, feel free to always tell me. Whatever you'd like to say is more than welcome. Suzanne at thesuzannevenkershow.com. If you want more of this, if you want less of this, whatever you want to say, feel free to tell me. That's it. So I'll see you next time.